All right. So, species in depth. It's been in a weird, place. It's been in a weird place lately. But I think this is gonna work. What we're gonna be doing now with species in depth is we're gonna be doing a whole sort of podcast style series on this now. That way, I can continue doing it and be a little bit more relaxed about it and everything like that. But I'm not alone today. I'm not alone. I'm with a co-host. So I'm gonna let my co-host here introduce themselves and everything like that.
Hello, everyone. I am Lily, or you can call me First, or Lorelai. I am the head of the Giftlins, and I am here to help out.
So some of you may or may not recognize this person. This is the leader of the Giplins, as they said. We did do a Giplin species in depth video. I think that might have actually been the last species in depth video I did before I just kind of put it on hiatus forever. But today we're not going to be talking about the Giplins. Today we're going to be talking about the Aonani. I don't know how to pronounce it. But we're going to be talking about this species here. We're going to go over their very, very minimal lore and go over our thoughts and everything. Yeah. So do you have anything to start with, Lily?
From what I can see by the wiki and by what very, very little lore we get, they're meant to be crystal and stone type creature in a magical forest, from what I can tell. Now, that is an interesting concept, in that there's like different types. I can agree, like, that is very interesting. Gives me the type of feel I would have with my Giplins, because there's different types. But it still fits into, it's still one species. It's just totally different types.
Yeah, and I've found that a lot of species do that. They'll just be like, "Oh, we don't have just this one default thing. We also have different types. So check these out." And they'll have like a water type, a winged type, an earth type, and it gets to a point where it's almost similar to Pokemon because they just end up with so many different types of them. And I mentioned that in the video where I talked about like what happened to species in depth. I mentioned how like all these species seem to do the same thing and they do a bunch of different types and it ends up sort of like Pokemon. But I will say, yeah, go ahead.
Well, for me, that I notice is that it's now become the run-in-the-mill joke for my species and I, saying that Ponytown species has now just basically their own version of Pokemon, which I find hilarious because if you think about the Giblins, we're just basically the Eevee family of the whole species community.
Just a whole bunch of EVs.
Whereas the Aonani, I believe, would be, I don't know.
Well, I have their thing here on Discord. I don't quite understand it. They have an albino version. They have a Flaonani version. I don't understand necessarily the difference between them. The Flaonani are a bird type Aonani. And then they have
And then you have the androids.
Yeah, and Androinani. It's so hard to say all of these.
I mean,
yeah.
at least the Giblins were easier to say.
Well, I got the Giblins on the first try. I immediately knew how to say that. I think you were impressed by that as well because that seemed to be something that not a lot of people got, I guess.
They either say Giflin or Gaiplin or...
Yeah, which I can kind of see Giflin. But anyway, back to the Aonani. They are they live in the forest. So that's where they live. They live in a forest, and they do have a special art of their forest. If I can find it real quick, it's not necessarily something that they created. It was something that they told me they found on Google Images, which I thought was funny. But it is a very beautiful forest, and if you go to their Discord server or whatever, you'll see it. But it's a very blue looking forest with glowing plants, some kind of crystal looking things hanging from the trees, just different glowing things, so to speak. It's basically a giant glowing forest, and I think that's one of the more interesting parts of it is what they are and where they live. Everything else after that, it just seems to be almost basic, or like, why is that there? For example, they have this cross on their face, and it protects them from the enemies, which, okay, that's fine, but it's also because their face is some form of screen, which I don't quite understand. I don't know why that's the case, but they have some kind of robotic nature to them in some way, which is very off-putting for me because I've seen so many cyborg species and so many robot species, but this
Yeah,
it just seems out of place. Why do they have a screen for a face? Why can't it just be like, oh, they have no eyes, they just have like this? Like, why isn't that just the case?
For me, I would think if you're going to be uh, either more primal or more advanced, please choose one or the other, or make it to where your primal slowly advancing into more advanced like timeline. You know how I mean?
Yeah, sort of like they need to be one or the other. They probably shouldn't be both. And is that what you're saying?
Unless they go from primal slowly into evolving into more advanced species,
I see what you're saying now.
like evolution.
Yeah, sort of like an evolution thing, and maybe that's something that they have in mind or something. Maybe the idea is that they were originally these crystal and stone deer pony things that eventually evolved into it or something. I don't know, but as the viewers will see, and as you've seen yourself, we actually mentioned this just before we started recording. There's virtually no lore on this. Like, I'm on the wiki right now. It's not even a page long. This wiki is not even technically a page long. Like, the only reason it's as long as it is because they have several screenshots in here, as well as the way they list out their mods. And yeah, I mean, there's almost nothing here, which is interesting way to start off the return of the species in depth. But I just find that a little bit odd that not only do they have something as like strange as like, oh, they have screens for faces, which is I guess fine, but it just seems out of place, as well as just I don't know. There's not really a whole lot going on with the species.
For me, I love their designs. I will say that.
Yeah,
Designs
the design is amazing. Actually, I don't think I sent it to you, but you probably found it in the Discord. But they do have this wonderful art of their character of the blue Aonani. And it looks wonderful. I love this is something else that I've said before in Species in Depth, but when you like go out to like actually draw the species outside of Ponytown and like outside the restrictions of Ponytown, you can make your species look way better because you're no longer confined by the limitations of Ponytown, which Ponytown, I will admit, is extremely diverse in what it can do, but it does have its limitations. And when you see things like this artwork of a random species, you can see that that limitation more, and you can see how like the species is just going to look way better. So I agree. I agree. That was a long way to say that I agree that the species itself looks really well, like really well designed.
But I do gotta take for a fact that Ponytown is very well lacking.
Wait, lacking what?
Well, lacking in freedom to create.
I only half
Whereas
agree
drawing
because
allows you.
yes, it's sort of like a middle ground between like what you can do like digitally with limitations and what you can draw, because the Ponytown to me, it has the best character creator of like all time. I've never seen any like pony creator or even like OC generator creator or whatever ever that has had as many features as Ponytown does, because every other one will just have oh, here's the Rainbow Dash's main. That's all you get. You get the main six's main, and that's it. And that's like the extent of other creators. But this one, you get to do basically whatever. That's why we see so many different species in Ponytown.
I mean, I gotta give credit where credit is due when it comes to designing species. Species designs, if you think about it, can actually be very difficult.
Oh, it is. It's extremely difficult, especially if you start on paper first, like I did. I probably was an idiot in doing that, but I started on paper first for one of my species. For the Woolix, I started on paper first. But
But for me, I think the Aonani, or however you wish to say their name, um, the designs are very eye-catching,
yeah, they're
very
extremely eye
pretty.
catching. I think that's how they were able to really generate such a huge following because, and I don't want to like throw shade at them or anything like that, but there's not really a whole lot going on with the species. Like there's literally not much, and I think the design itself is what's allowed them to get so many members and keep the species alive, so to speak.
And I'm not wanting to throw shade at any of the species or whatever, but I've noticed that if your species looks complicated or uh, hard to do unless you actually learn it, then that's more appealing to everybody else. Because, oh, it doesn't look like this or this or this. And that's why I think, as well, that Aonani and many of the other species have grown such a big following just because of the design themselves.
Yeah, I
It's
mean,
all about design.
design is like the design is probably the most important part when it comes to making a species if you want like members to join. If you aren't necessarily worried about members joining, then I would say put all that extra time and effort into the lore because the way species work is you more or less have to go into Ponytown as that species and just advertise, hey, this is a species, and people are going to realize that because of how eye catching it is, and they're like, oh, this thing looks really cool. I might get into that.
In all honesty, I would say that as a small species myself, seeing species with lack of lore but really well designed kind of hurts a whole lot to me. Because my team and I are working so hard for lore, but what we lack in design we make up for in lore, and that's what people don't understand. You can have a beautiful, outstanding design, but lack in lore because you only made the species to look good. That's it.
Yeah,
That's all. And
exactly.
that's my honest opinion. That's all they did. They made a species that looks pretty. Do you have a lot of lore? No, you don't. You have minimal to no lore.
Yes, that I think is the main reason why we haven't really necessarily discussed too much about the species itself, is apart from our opinions, is because there's not really a whole lot to mention. They have some fun facts, and that's pretty much the extent of it. So let's go ahead and go over the fun facts. The first one, of course, we kind of briefly mentioned. They have a cross on their face, and it protects them from enemies. They also have this new thing that they just recently added. It is some kind of special Spotify looking, a deviant art looking symbol on their face when they listen to music. Um, it's supposed to be a note, but it kind of just looks like the deviant art symbol to me. I don't know why. And it does. It looks like the DeviantArt symbol to me. And their other fun fact here is when they sleep, their cross turns into a battery, and it shows everyone that they are charging, which falls into the whole like, oh, they are cyborgish in a way. Um, then the wiki goes on to say like why their name is what they are, which is it's Aonani is Hawaiian, which means beautiful light, which I honestly love that. I love when a name has like a deeper meaning than just, oh, it's called this, because it just makes you feel so satisfied when you find that out. Even if you're told it later on, it just feels so satisfying. But it feels more satisfying when you figure it out. But it's really nice. I love that personally.
Personally, for me, I think they should have used the wiki as lore, and then you get into the actual like Ponytown information, like where they can be found, like they did here.
Yeah, right at the end of the wiki, more or less, they kind of say where they can be found, which is the 18 plus English server. Sometimes at a safe server, but they sometimes, chill out species meeting area. No one knows where that is necessarily. Like a random that isn't super familiar with Ponytown isn't going to know where that is. I don't even know where that is because I don't really necessarily go to a lot of
Uh,
species meetings and stuff.
I do.
I think it's a bridge somewhere. That's just like a
No,
guess
it's
though.
not. It's um, you know the Boku no Hero area, right?
No, because I don't know the fandom map. The fandom the quote unquote fandom map, it changes all the time. I see so many versions of it, so I don't really put any stock into it because it's just changing too much.
I'll help you next time you get on Ponytown.
All right. But they chill out at the species meeting area and they randomly run around PT overall. Um, this wiki doesn't mention it, but they did tell me this in not necessarily in person, but they did message this to me on Discord. During their meetings, they will line up in a rainbow style fashion and like a rainbow line, and they do this so that they can shine together and show a little bit of their powers that they have, which are quote unquote, friendship and kindness, um, which I think is kind of interesting. I like that because when you see the Aonani line up like this, it actually is really beautiful. It really does look a lot like a rainbow, which I think is awesome. And I've seen these lineups before,
I
like in Ponytown before, and it's crazy.
I'm sorry to say, but all I hear when they say uh friendship and stuff like that, all I can think about is totally nothing else has done things about friendship and stuff like that. The power of friendship. Looks at My Little Pony, looks at Fairy Tale, looks at everything else that I have seen beforehand.
Yeah, it's not necessarily the most original thing, um, but they at least have something. At least they do something, which is kind of interesting. But I think I think a way to improve it would be to be like, hey, they have these types of powers. They have like light based powers and perhaps even like mineral manipulation powers, so that they can like create crystals and stuff with their mind or something. I think that would be cool, and I think maybe some form of light manipulation to go with that would be a great way to help the species a little bit further and be like, hey, here's a tiny bit more lore.
Yeah, for me, I think it would be good if they have like, I don't know, the flying ones can be like based on uh sky based powers.
Sort of like weather type
Alb-
deals, maybe lightning instead of just regular light or something.
yeah, for me, the albinos I don't think could handle light at all because if you look at anything albino on Earth,
Yeah, they don't like light.
humans, animals, and stuff like that, they can't handle it because it actually burns their skin worse and it
Yeah,
makes their skin even worse. Whereas Andronanis, I can see them being more android-like. Like they can maybe one has a power drill skill, to help build. We also have ones that can actually build if they are androids. Something that can actually advance them into more advanced technology than what we're seeing here.
yes, exactly, and that helps their lore and everything as well. But and this is gonna sound really cliche, but this just in, they did make a new channel in their Discord server. They did that today, and it shows off their areas. So they have their area during spring, which seems to be near Pegasus Lake, like right above it. And then they have during winter, they just go to the caves, which is interesting. But they just now made that. They just now did that because it says on here today at 11:13 a.m. So literally, while we were in the middle of a call, they added another channel to show where their area is, which is kind of funny.
Yeah, I'm looking at the history. It's still kind of like the
It's just the wiki copy and pasted over.
yeah.
That's all it is.
I
Which
mean,
I hated that so much because this is this. Let's talk about their Discord server for a second. I want to critique that for a moment because I just want to. Their Discord server is the most unorganized species server I've ever been in so far. Like I've done, I think 7 others, maybe 6 other species in depth, and all of them were more organized. They had at the top how to make their species, their questions, the important stuff, and then they had the lore and everything else, and then they had their like regular stuff like their general and other stuff like that at the bottom.
are you just you're just looking at the Giplins, aren't you?
Oh, I wasn't. I was looking at the. I'm looking at the Aonani species server right now.
I
They're
know, but like talk about the organized ones.
they're so disorganized in the Aonani species server. It pains me. I normally what I like to do is I normally like to join the server of the species that I'm gonna do an in depth on because maybe they forgot to mention something that's in their server, or maybe by the time I get ready to record they add something and they just didn't tell me yet, and it allows me to get a little bit more information that I may not get otherwise. But this it's one of the worst in terms of how organized it is. It really is. Why, in God's name, is the Aonai history the only part of any kind of lore you have related to your species all the way at the very bottom? Now they have Aonani clubs at like below that, but like the Aonani history and the Aonani area is all the way at the bottom. Why is it all the way on the bottom? You have to go out of your way to find it. And I don't like that. By the way, I have all of these other tabs like closed. By default, they're open, so it's actually worse than what the viewers are seeing right now. But it's like, it's insane. There's so much you have to like scroll through. It's actually overwhelming on top of being like where it's at, you know?
Mm-hmm.
It just feels
But I
very
think we
disorganized.
should do one more because I feel like the Aonani's lack of lore and everything like that is getting to us.
It's frustrating to me. It really is because that's one of the things that I wanted to do with Species in Depth originally is like share the lore and everything else. Is like, hey, you know, this is a really cool species. It has this lore and this lore that you may not know because you've probably only ever seen it in Ponytown, never actually joined the species or whatever. Uh, so it frustrates me when it's like, okay, this is a species that I know is popular, that I know a lot of people know of, but it has no lore that I can talk about necessarily.
Mm-hmm.
But there's not really much else to say. What else do you think we can say about the Aonani here?
Really nothing else. I think the lack of lore has really gotten to us to the point where I do not want to think about this species except for the design. That's how bad the lack of lore is.
Yeah, that's
As
how bad it
someone
is
who's
for
a
me
lore
too.
buff.
That's how bad it is for me too, because I love lore, but I mean, like there really isn't anything to the Aonani. There's nothing necessarily that makes them special. They themselves have said that there's other species that look very similar to them. If I can find it real quick, because they said it in like a DM or something. They have they said that they forgot to say this, but there are a few species which looks like Aonanis. None of us try to copy each other, so the reason why we look almost the same was by accident. They are the neon robots and the Arthiosis. I don't know how the hell they pronounce that. But essentially, they are extremely similar. They look almost exactly the same. They have the same antlers. They have the cross on the face. They're different colors. Like it matches pretty close to what they seem to be in the Aonani. Now, I don't know if they have more lore than them, but I don't know. They said that they were at peace, so there's no beef between those species owners or anything like that. But I thought I would go ahead and mention that because that's something, at least that's somewhat interesting, I guess.
Yeah, well, what can you do when there's a lack of lore? You know?
Yeah, exactly.
All I do suggest to the Aonanis is try to work on more lore. You have a team. you have a team that can help you.
Yeah, they
It's
have
always good to have a brainstorm of a team.
yeah, they have 6 server mods, which I don't know how intricate they are into the whole like species itself, but they are 6 server mods. So they have 6 people there that they can call on and be like, hey, let's like try and work on some lore here. Let's brainstorm some ideas. Brainstorms are really really good at like figuring out information or getting ideas. I mean,
Yeah, what I do suggest for the Aonani is just to come up with the lore, like more lore than what you have, and try to fix the lore that you do have. Because otherwise, people who are lore buffs, like myself, even though you have a beautiful species, will be drawn away because of the lack of lore.
yeah, and that's kind of how it is for me. It's like, oh, this is a beautiful species. Aonani was actually something that was requested multiple times, I think, like 2 or 3 times, I think, and that's why I wanted to do them. But then I was like, why am I doing this? Why am I making another species in depth video when I don't know like what I want to do with species in depth? And then I was like, I'm gonna put it on hold. I'm gonna figure out what to do next. And then you more or less came along and was basically like, hey, let's do a podcast. Like that's basically how it went. which was great.
I mean, not only do you get to share your opinion, you get to hear others' opinions about the species, about the lore, and everything like that.
Yeah, and I think that works really well
honestly,
for this format that we're doing.
well, I guess that's it for this species in-depth
Yeah, I think
video,
that's gonna
where
do it for
there
this
really
one.
wasn't much in-depth. There wasn't really much in-depth.
There's nothing to go in depth on apart from it looks pretty.
I'm sorry, Aonani, but our brutal honesty is write more lore for the love of God.
Yeah, I agree 100%. That's the thing that I want to make clear about like species in depth. Like I mentioned this before with like some of my earlier videos on species in depth is like I am going to be 100% honest with species in depth all the way through. I'm not going to bullshit it in any way. I'm not going to be like, oh, I love this species because of this and that, when in reality I may hate it for that and that. It's just about being brutally honest and giving out the brutal facts of the species, because that's, I think, the best way to like show off the species. Is just show off what they are and then give my opinions on that species.
Yeah, so until next time, everyone.
Yeah, that's gonna do it. I think there's not really much else to say. This is definitely an experimental format that we're gonna be doing here. I really want to do this again because this is a lot of fun to like just talk about a random species with someone. And Lily will be here for the next one. I don't know when we'll record the next one. I don't know when the next one will come out. I don't even know when this one's gonna come out. But it's gonna come out on an off day. It's not gonna come out on the regular schedule. But yeah, there's not really anything else to say about Aonani. If you're interested in the species, you can visit it on Bootpedia, the Ponytown Wikipedia. It's called Bootpedia, which I've always thought was funny. But yeah, I mean, there's not much else here. It's not even a page long of information, and yeah, I mean, I don't know. I'm kind of rambling here, but that's gonna do it for the video, I think. Unless Lily has anything else to say. Do you have anything else to add, Lily?
Nope, because if I speak anymore, I think I would probably regret it.
All right, so I want to say one last thing. Actually, I'm very sorry if this came off as like mean towards this species. I don't have any beef with this species. I don't have anything wrong with this species. I just don't like the fact that there's not really much going on with it. With that said, though, I think that is going to conclude everything now. So if you did like everything you watched, please do, like, subscribe, share, do those wonderful things. Because when you do those wonderful things, you get access to wonderful content such as this. But that's not all you get. That's not all you get. You also get to become wonderful yourself. And I think we all want that. So do those wonderful things. And until next time, stay wonderful. Stay wonderful.